Hey everybody, it's the Investments Lawyer, and today we're going to talk about the Wild West, fundraising on social media. And remember, nothing we talk about is legal advice, so for that, talk to an attorney. Okay, let's dive in. So, if you're selling securities, which you are if you have an investment fund or an SPV, you need to either register those securities with the SEC or find a good exemption from registration. So we have some options down here. So you can have a public offering, which is registering your securities with the SEC. You wouldn't want to do that because it's very expensive and it takes a long time and you have to deal with lawyers a lot, which is everybody's worst nightmare, so we don't want that. So typically an investment fund or SPV would not do a public offering. Two other exemptions are Regulation A and Regulation CF. So instead of doing a public offering, you could use one of these exemptions. But they're often more expensive too, and there's a bit more rules. It's still not a very easy thing to do. So instead, what pretty much all of our clients do is they rely on something called Regulation D. So you may have heard of two things called Rule 506B and Rule 506C. So I came up with a very stupid way of remembering what these mean. Rule 506B is 506 be quiet, don't talk about it. Whereas Rule 506C is come see our fund, Rule 506C. All right, I told you it was stupid, but that's what we have. So let's look at each of these. Rule 506B is what we consider a true private placement. So this is kind of the old school way to raise capital. No general solicitation. You cannot talk on Twitter, you can't talk on LinkedIn, you can't go on podcasts and talk about your offering. You can say, oh, hi, I'm this person and I invest in real estate generally, but never talk about actually raising a fund. So there's that. No public solicitation. Also, you're limited to the number of non-accredited investors you can have. You can have up to 35 non-accredited investors and an unlimited amount of accredited investors, but you're limited to some non-accredited investors. Now, if you do take even one non-accredited investor, you have to do a whole bunch more disclosure, which takes time and money, so be wary of that. Now, to prove that someone is an accredited investor, all they have to do is say, hey, I'm an accredited investor. And we say, okay, good enough. So that's Rule 506B. The benefit is mostly that it's really easy to have people just say that they're accredited. The downside is that you can't speak publicly about the fund. And I guess you can have up to 35 non-accredited investors, but most of our clients don't do that because, like I said, there's more disclosure. The other option, which is why I'm wearing the cowboy hat because it's the Wild West, is Rule 506C. And this is only about a decade old, so it's kind of new. You know, people are getting used to it. It's certainly becoming more popular. And here's how 506C works. You can have a general solicitation. You can go on podcasts, you can post on Twitter, you can run around Times Square with a sandwich board attached to you saying, this is my fund, please invest in it. You can do all that stuff. I wouldn't necessarily do all that stuff, but you could. Here, you can have an unlimited number of accredited investors. So remember, you could have an unlimited amount of accredited investors here too, so that's the same, but no non-accredited investors. All investors must be accredited. So that's one important difference from 506B. And the other important difference is in 506C, you have to have investors prove that they're accredited. You can't just say, hey, are you accredited? And they say, yes, not good enough. You need to take reasonable steps to verify that they're accredited. So there are some third-party services that will do that for you, or you can have a form letter that you have LPs send to their CPA, accountant, financial advisor that says, hey, is this person accredited? And they say yes, and you say, okay, good enough. So these are the two ways you can raise money, most typically, if you have a fund or SPV. So if you're raising money on social media, you really want to go with 506C because that way you can actually say something on social media without getting in trouble. If you do 506B, it's very tricky. You have to be very careful. You shouldn't say too much. So if you're on social media, you know, the people who you see posting all the time are either using 506C or they're potentially not entirely following the law. So that is the core of what we're talking about today. The last little part here is even if you're using 506C, you still, can't perpetrate a fraud or generally bamboozle the public. So no fraudulent statements. Make sure everything you say is true. Obviously, hopefully goes without saying, but there you have it. So if you're fundraising on social media, you're likely going to want to go with 506C, which we talked about up here. You can generally solicit. You can have an unlimited number of accredited investors, no non-accredited investors, and you must take reasonable steps to verify that investors are accredited. And like the fourth one here is no fraud. So don't do that. Well, thanks for sticking with me. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. And obviously would love it if you would subscribe. So thank you very much. Have a good one.